需要的是一个舞台。尤其是我们现在的年轻人，包括之前去交大去给他们去做一些分享的时候，我发现都是非常优秀的孩子们，但是他们就缺少这样的一个舞台。那我也希望呢，这次跟 Brain Power 结合，能够帮助更多的孩子们能够有机会去学习表达，然后去更好的沟通，然后成为未来的领袖。而这个沟通表达也是成为未来领袖的一个必备的一个技能。谢谢。
谢谢孟佳。我们还有一家在国内的公司叫成都真奇妙教育科技有限公司。我不知道那个，这个曾总有没有上线，但没关系。这个 AI121是一个课外活动的平台，他们在这个平台上有10万加的一个学生用户，也是用人工智能来帮助学生进行学习和教育的，以及进行一些课外拓展的一些科技平台。那我们也这一次能够得到 UniSpeak 得到真奇妙科技有限公司的这个大力支持，非常感谢。在这里也感谢北航的校友会。那我们接下来快速的进入正题。这个在我们今天开始之前，我们这个今天的讲座是有一个群的。如果希望在这个活动以后进行更多的交流的话，欢迎加入这个群。当然，这个今天的这个活动，我刚才录屏开始的晚了一点，但是没关系，不会影响我们的主体内容。回头我们也会在群里面把那个回放的链接发给大家。那我自我介绍一下，刚才我是上海交大的校友。这个从上海交大本科毕业以后去了英国留学，然后在英国待了几年，然后后来在上海也工作了很多年，现在在加拿大工作和生活。我在全球的欧洲、中国和加拿大都有大概10多年的工作经验，主要是聚集在市场营销以及这个战略管理咨询这一块。目前我在上海交大的多伦多校友会也是帮忙了，从2017年开始就一直在帮忙，也希望能够帮助到更多的校友。OK，那今天前面的就啰嗦到这里。Without further ado, let me introduce the distinguished guest today, Vanessa. Vanessa is a CEO at BrainPower. She's got a successful career. At her very young age, she became the executive level of one of the biggest banks in Canada. And also, she's been this is her second CEO position in her career stage. Now she's not only the CEO of BrainPower, but also the big brain behind all the curriculum design and also all the innovative course design at BrainPower. She also teaches at University of Toronto, the MBA course at Rodman School of Management. Also, she helps with the incubators to build up the collaboration with corporates and scale up projects. So without further ado, I think welcome Vanessa, and happy to have you on this panel. Do you want to say hi to the audience today?
Hi, thank you for having me and the wonderful introduction. I'm so thrilled to be able to connect with some friends far away, just starting Saturday as I'm closing off another wonderful week.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So today I will be interviewing Vanessa for most of the conversation, and today we are going to focus on facing the children with high potential but underachieving. So how content we're gonna cover is how do we find out what kind of high potential they have? How do we cater them in the right way? And providing all the right support to your children and all the young kids around you. So I think for Vanessa, I would like to start with the personal question. Because see, you have an amazing son, and who used to be. Can you tell us more story about Marco and where he started and where he is now?
Sure. And this is really where my story with BrainPower starts as well. So my son is 15, and like many parents, when it was time to go in high school here in Canada, you have to write a lot of entrance exam tests and do interviews. And we were really worried because if you looked at Marco's report card, it seemed like he was a very average student. And we were ready to accept that because not every student is high potential. But what we saw at home was a really creative, motivated young man. He was interested in reading documentaries. He was deeply interested in history. He had an ability to really communicate and debate that we thought was notable, but it just wasn't showing in his report card. And so we wanted to apply to Upper Canada College, which is one of the best schools in Canada. Only 20 students in grade 9 get accepted, and it was a long shot because he didn't have straight A's on his report card. But we worked with a PhD educator, and what she taught me was really, really fascinating, that you need to sometimes train kids to show what they know, because of assessment in schools sometimes don't bring out and demonstrate a child's true internal potential. And we worked really hard with Marco, my husband and I, over a year, and he was indeed accepted and is now excelling in a really, really challenging IB program at Upper Canada College. And I love to share that story because when I exited my first business as CEO, and when I thought about what I wanted to do next, I thought there must be lots of parents like me that see something in their child that isn't coming out at school. And Brainpower really was the place that I came across the business and thought, I wish I knew about this. I wish it was available to me, because it was the number one concern as a parent is always your child's education. There's really nothing that's more important. And yeah, that was a little bit of a personal story as a mom, before I was the CEO, who experienced the problem that our business really wants to solve.
That's great. Yeah, not every kid's well, it is about a whole family effort. Maybe before we move on to talk more about the children education, I want to see if we have parents in the audience. So can I ask the audience questions? 在那个直播平台和这个在 Zoom 线上的朋友们，如果我希望问你们一点问题，在那个如果你们现在都是有小孩在读小学或者是在小初高的，都可以在群里面打一下你们的孩子的大概的年龄吗？就打在这个聊天里面。如果你们这个是第一个问题。孟佳那边麻烦你看一下有没有咱们的在线上的观众朋友能够回答一下这个问题。咱们在 Zoom 的也可以回答一下，您的孩子大概是什么年龄的？我还有第二个问题，就是说，作为家长的你们有没有像刚才 Vanessa 分享的那样一样，就是说你们非常相信自己的孩子都是有潜力的，然后但是肯定还没有被挖掘到。如果有的话，麻烦你在那个聊天里面打个1，好吗？我们给1分钟的时间让大家回答一下。Vanessa, I was asking like, the parents, do they believe their children have the hidden potential that's not discovered, similar as Marco's story? And then how old are their kids? I was just looking for some answers from the live streaming platform as well. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, well, I think I'll continue with the questions. So for from Marco's case, when you raising your own kid, but from an educator perspective, like can you give us more general view about like what does the high potential learners look like, and how can other people find hidden potential similar as you discovered from Marco? Do you want
Yes,
let me know if you
great
want me to share the slides. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the one slide with the 6 general types
Yeah.
that is really useful as a reference. And I do say this is a reference because there's really, children are little humans and they're very, very complex. No one's really figured out exactly how to unlock potential in kids. However, there's been a lot of research, including a piece of research by this researcher who studied thousands of gifted children and really said there's various characteristics and categories that you can identify for these types of learners. And I'll talk a little bit about each because some descriptions are very obvious and you'll say, yes, that's clearly high potential. And some are not as obvious. And what do we even mean by high potential? What we really mean is the potential to be above average in one or more areas that are academic in nature. And so that might be mathematics, it might be language, it might be the study of history. There's there's a very broad range of the definition of intelligence, of course, right? So the first definition is the one that's most associated with high potential children. Very successful kids, very motivated, very well behaved, right? That sounds like exactly what we would expect. What's interesting, we can talk about this later, is even children in this category sometimes aren't motivated to actually achieve to their potential. So they might appear to be doing very, very well, but they're often terrified to fail. And why that's very, very important to know is in the workplace today, especially if you're going to go into a field that's innovative like technology, entrepreneurship, one must be comfortable with taking risks, and one must be comfortable with the fear of failure, because the workforce, the only thing we know about the workforce of tomorrow is that we don't know what it's going to look like, and that it's going to involve a very, very fast pace of change and lots of ambiguity. So while this type of learner is clearly high potential, in terms of education, it's really important that we recognize that very successful, motivated children need to be pushed in a different kind of way. And so that's a typical example. The next example, if you want to flip the slide, Caroline, is the creative learner. And this is very common. You might have a child that's very creative, but they're very high energy. They don't want to sit at their desks. They like running around. Maybe they talk too much. They don't put up their hand. They want to talk really quickly. And often we say that these children might have behavioral or attention disorders, and in many cases they do. However, what's really important is that creative intelligence is absolutely critical for the future. And there are ways to engage this type of child. This type of child, the creative child, loves group work, collaborative activities. They want the opportunity to make presentations, to be mentors and role models. And it's really important that they are given those opportunities. Otherwise, they might appear as if they're not listening or even moderately combative. And so this is the creative learner. And again, we have to be careful not to bucket kids too much. So these are very general descriptions. And I think the next one is really interesting, Caroline. The underground learner. The underground learner could be very quiet, maybe denies their ability, is probably a little bit insecure, seen as quiet and shy, a bit ambivalent. Ambivalent means it looks or sounds like they're not interested in moving forward. For this type of learner, what you have to do is kind of peel off the layers of the onion and really start with giving them the tools for more self-confidence and encouraging them to feel comfortable sharing their voice. That's very, very important. So a quiet student is not necessarily an indication of low potential. It's important in a learning environment to give this type of student absolutely every opportunity to show what they know, as they say. And the next type of learner is at risk. And this this type of learner is interesting because this is the child that you would think is absolutely going to end up in jail one day. So a student that's maybe a little bit angry or manipulative, very resistive to authority and disruptive. And what's important for this type of child, in order to bring out the best, in order to see what potential exists, they have to have a lot of structure and safety and positive encouragement. They have to have short-term goals that are set, that they can see they achieve, and have very clear frameworks about what does it mean to get through the day, what does it mean to succeed. And so a really gifted educator will be able to work with this kind of child and actually regulate some of the output from that child. But again, very common, especially in a very large classroom, to just make assumptions that a child that exhibits these behaviors is not a high potential child, and that's just simply not the case. And then the next type of learner, this is a really controversial common topic. Often children that are gifted have what's called twice exceptional skills. You'll see lots of movies about, children. There's the famous movie with Temple Grandin, where she is autistic but has this extreme giftedness in one specific area. And so for twice exceptional students, this is where a very, very specialized, experienced type of educator is required to truly understand where this child is gifted, what their exceptionalities are, and build a very, very specific and clear plan to help that child really reach their highest potential levels. And it's important to know if your child is exceptional, because in this case, intervention is probably a really, really good idea. Intervention means working very closely with a specialist, both inside and outside the classroom. Yeah, and I think the last type is autonomous. So these are the students that like a lot of independence, ambitious, and sounds fantastic, right? Sounds like an amazing student. But again, for students that are on the surface fine, the question to really always ask is, this student is intelligent and smart and motivated. Are we absolutely helping this child achieve their own full potential? Because this particular research study actually showed that 60% of high potential students actually underachieve based on their own potential, based upon the potential that exists within them. So for these types of learners, giving them additional extended support, providing inspirational resources, and giving them opportunities for extended learning is very, very important. They like freedom and autonomy, but you really have to harness that in support of their education and not just assume that what they can achieve in the classroom is a sufficient indicator of their true potential.
Wow,
so those are the types of learners. Yeah, and that was a lot of talking. I'm sorry to do so much talking. And I think it's important, Caroline and everyone who's listening, to really reiterate that you can have a child that's a little bit of a mix and match of these types. So you might see your child as a little bit creative and a little bit at risk. So maybe they're creative and a little rambunctious. So it's not quite, we don't want to put kids in boxes. These are really intended to provide indicative types of categories and things to watch out for, so that in and out of the classroom you can match good opportunities with your child's type.
Well, that's amazing, because for I would say this 6 type of high potential learners actually covers a well-rounded all the aspects of the child. But like you said, it's children are not in boxes, so there's overlap between each types. I think I want to come, Vanessa, I want to pull you back a little bit to I think for parents now, you have introduced the 6 high potential learners. Like, well, can we reiterate a little bit about like why it is important for the parents to know all these learning types, and what's the given the situation of like we were we have been 3 years in COVID and the changing global environment and the micro environment, for example, the changes in the Ontario education environment, like why it's important for parents to know and how can they recognize and utilize it.
That's a really great question, Caroline, because I think the number one parent question all parents have is what is their role in their child's education? Because the kids go to school all day, and especially as your children get older, you're certainly not as actively involved in the subject matter. When they're toddlers, you can see very discreetly if they're learning the alphabet, if they're learning how to count. But once they get a bit older, how do you know how they're doing in math or what they're doing? It's very tough. And so I think the role of the parent is really to be the advocate for the child. And why these profiles are helpful to parents is because you know your child's, what you know most about your child is their nature and what they're strong at. So if you have a child that's creative, that always paints at home, that's always thinking of ideas, that wants to act out a play or chat away at dinner, you'll very intuitively know that. And so you can share that information with the educator and say, you know, what methods are you going to use in the classroom to help unleash the potential in my creative child? My child is not going to do well sitting down doing worksheets all day long because they're a very creative type. So what are the opportunities for projects or special assignments? That's an example of a very specific question. And a personal example for me, because I was given that advice about my own son. He is a very expressive individual who's so passionate about certain things that wasn't coming out in the classroom. He loves history. So we asked the teacher, it's Remembrance Day, you know, instead of doing this assignment, can he do an assignment about something he's passionate about and maybe a presentation? And I remember he did just such a fantastic job. And I think, you know, if I hadn't advocated for him, that may have never happened. That teacher may not have ever seen that side of him, because you have to appreciate teachers have in some schools 30 plus kids in a class. A lot of those kids truly have remedial learning issues. So the kids that are smart, they're probably just not getting 100% of the effort and attention. So I think the first way parents can advocate is to make sure the teacher knows who your child is and to ask questions about how the teacher is adjusting assessments in the classroom environment to bring out the best. I think the second way, and this is why Brain Power exists, is making sure that the child has opportunities for engagement outside the classroom. So if you have a child that is very successful, straight A's, and doesn't take a lot of risk, maybe that's a hint that, you know, maybe you should try a risky activity. Maybe you should try rock climbing or activities that bring your child out of their comfort zone. Maybe they should take a public speaking course and learn how to say a speech on stage by themselves. And so as the parent, you can use in class, but also out of class opportunities to really unleash the incredible potential that really exists in our children.
Well, that's what I heard. I think what I heard from you is these high potential types. When as a parent, when you spotted one direction, you can actually stretch them to a different direction to just try their potential and to see if they can go to the next level. That is really great. Yeah. I think
Absolutely.
one thing you mentioned about, because I know for many parents, not every, not I would say not every single person is perfect and knows everything. So as a parent, how to utilize external expertise is very important. You shared one experience that you used, like when you were trying to discover Marco's potential, you hire external PhDs to try to help you to distinguish the Marco's potential. And then, how can you share some experience about how you can, as parents, how you can leverage external educators or external expertise to help you on children's education?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's obvious I'm a fan of PhD educators. Not that there aren't great educators that are not PhDs. I don't have a PhD, for example. And one of the reasons is PhDs are scientists in their fields. They're experts in their fields. And it is their life passion, because how else can you explain that someone would spend 10 years studying one thing to write a really, really long essay or thesis, right? And so when a child is working with an expert in their field, when they're working with a, someone who's earned a PhD in language arts, and when they're studying text with that person, they're getting a level of passion and engagement and expertise that most children won't ever experience until they get to university. And when you connect that level of educator with a younger child, it's really quite magical what happens, because the child's very naturally accelerating at a faster rate. So one of the best examples of brain power is, we give university level feedback on essays, and we ask the students to submit and resubmit twice. And so they're getting very, very detailed feedback on their writing from someone who's an expert, but they actually have to take that feedback, implement it, resubmit, and become better. So it's that growth mindset that working with an expert, you can, it's no different than saying, if you want to be an expert tennis player, you need a tennis coach, and you have to put in a lot of practice. Otherwise, you're just never going to get better. And, academic fields are quite exactly the same. You're never going to win a public speaking competition unless you're trained and you practice and you learn from the best. And so I think as parents, if you could think of academics the way we think of competitive sport, that's where you're going to get results. And I know it's uncomfortable because we don't want to over push our kids. There's so many issues with mental health. So this has to be balanced. But the academic big leagues, they are very similar to competitive sport. And the individuals that put in the time and get the coaching, they're the ones that are going to win.
Wow, that's it. I would say coming from an Asian background myself, I went through, I went to, so the host university today, like Jiao Tong University and Beihang University, they are both the very engineering heavy schools.
Yeah.
And we really highlight and emphasize a lot of education, the power of the education, and a lot of PhDs from these schools, engineering PhDs. Yeah, I think getting a combination of not only academics but also the on language, on the soft skills, that's very important for children's education. I think that a little bit off track. I think that's just came out of our conversation just now. Um, I think these types are very important for parents to recognize from their children. But what if one of the direction or potential they recognize doesn't really work on their children? Like, is there any other tips to share as an educator if one area doesn't work? Do you encourage them to try other things, or if you have other examples of the experience to share?
For sure. It's a really good question, because children are not robots. And so there isn't one algorithm that's going to unlock potential in a child. And we're very mindful at Brain Power to not suggest that we have some kind of playbook. That is a very superficial way to look at unlocking potential in a human being. So the way we like to think about it is there's a variety of tactics and methods you can use to unlock potential. And with children, like everything in life, sometimes it's trial and error. I think trying a lot of different things until you see what really sticks is a good approach, and really being honest with the outcome you're seeing. I think a mistake that we see many parents make is that they try something with a child. They want their child to participate in contest math. And, if the match isn't there with the capability and the passion, that might not be the best way to unleash potential in that child. And so I think you also have to be very honest about the areas that you should focus on. And so I'm 5 feet tall. I'm not very tall. And so it would have been a little bit of a waste if my parents spent a lot of time and money putting me in basketball, right? I'm never going to be a champion basketball player. It's not fair, but it's true. And so, but I had other tasks. I was actually a competitive figure skater. And so for my competitive sport, that's what I spent a lot of time on. And I'm expressive and I'm sporty. And so that worked for me. And so I think as parents, we have to also be honest about what you're working with, for sure, and try different things, because it might take a few different tactics to really unlock and find that magic moment. And you'll know as a parent, when your child is in their element, because suddenly you're not pushing and you're not encouraging. It's the child becomes self-directed and comfortable, and you can see the growth. It's amazing when you find the right education or opportunity fit for your child. It becomes, something that's on autopilot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Thanks for the answer. I think that's totally be honest and be true to yourself and to your family. I think for Brain Power has a history of over 30 years, and it has been very successful, educating thousands of students. I think since we are talking about unleash all the high potentials from children, how can you share a little bit more about like how has Brain Power been doing this over the past 30 years?
Yeah, and how? Great question. So Brain Power started actually a long time ago as a school for gifted children in Israel, and it's specifically in the area of mathematics, because there's methodology for learning mathematics in Russia, Ukraine, Eastern Slavic states that's fairly different from the rest of the world. One of the biggest differences is what's called the spiral method. Mathematical concepts are learned, but they're constantly interweaved. It's not a mastery method where you learn one skill and go on to the next one. And so it's a very unique but effective way of learning math, where you're leading with understanding logic and problem solving at its core. And so as the founder of the business, the original founder, moved to Canada, many other families had immigrated to the North Toronto area. And so we had a following for this method. And so the business grew over time very organically. And I think that seed of what was successful at the beginning, which was very, very experienced faculty. I mean, the founder of the business, he had a PhD and studied at the Sorbonne in France, and he's working with children in grade 1. And so I think that level of expertise combined with a very strong focus on critical thinking, whether it's math, language, public speaking, to really push and encourage the kids to be critical thinkers, to question what they see, to look at things in different ways. These are the sort of concepts that unite all of the different subjects of Brain Power. So what you can see on this slide, for example, is complexity. There's a difference between accelerated learning and complex learning. And acceleration is what we're most used to. Is the child learning above their grade level? This is something common. Parents want to know, if my child's in grade 5, are they performing at grade 6? And so certainly our programs are accelerated, but complexity is also important, because complexity means they're not just learning the material at a superficial level. The highest cognitive domains are those where you can create, evaluate, and analyze. And so in literature programs, for example, we don't just read poetry. We read the poetry, we understand it, and then the children must write something in a similar vein. They must create their own poem. So even if the poem is an advanced poem, it's not enough just to read it and understand it. We push them to engage in the more complex areas of learning that involve creation. And that's true of public speaking, where we have the kids craft political speeches, understand the art of rhetoric, and present. Every single class, they have to deliver a speech. And even in mathematics, our children as young as grade 1 engage in fairly complex logic problems each class, which requires them to take the little bits of what they've learned, the bits of rote learning, but take it up a level and really analyze, evaluate, and create. And so those are two things that people often get mixed up, but we're really proud that we focus on complexity. I think the next three are important as well, just as important. Engagement, if you see the blue, what does that mean? It means, in really simple terms, if children and students love what they're learning about, they learn more effectively. That is absolutely the case. And so learning that engages the student through group activities, through interesting novel experiences, they're actually learning better and faster than if they are just sitting there doing worksheets. That's a proven fact. And it's also more fun for the kids and they're happier. So how can you possibly not want that for your child? The next two are really interesting. And this is where somewhere like Brainpower really differentiates. Academic mentorship. It's a fact that if you have a mentor that you can work with that provides you with personalized learning and the opportunity to grow, you will actually succeed at a higher rate. And so, for example, in our program, you often have the same instructor for 2 to 3 years, and that instructor gets to watch you grow up and gets to give you feedback over many years, because personal development doesn't happen overnight. And in the case of some children, especially boys, it can take years. And so that mentorship role is really, really important. And last but not least, we talked about this already, feedback. And again, you're never going to get better at your tennis game if you don't get the feedback and implement the feedback. So it's not enough to get an essay back corrected with a grade. You actually have to look at the essay, rewrite it, and resubmit it. And it's not enough to get a math test back with a mark. You know, are you looking at the questions and are you identifying what you did wrong? And is the child internalizing that and learning from their mistake? Feedback is actually one of the critical aspects of learning. And in large classroom settings where a teacher has 30 plus kids, it's very hard to have effective feedback in a class that size, because you simply can't, you could never mark 30 essays and give the kids the feedback they need. It's like humanly impossible. So, you know, our classes are 8 kids and our instructors are spending hours and hours and hours on marking and feedback each week.
Well, that's I would say thanks for sharing that, because by analyzing the high potential learner types and adopting the like acceleration, complexity, engagement, and feedback, these kind of methodology also apply to parenthood as well, I would say, because when parents are interacting with the children, try to recognize the high potential, it's also very important for them to try to engage with the children, provide feedback, and also engage the whole set of methodology. That is really useful, I would say. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think for the major, for the major content part, is there anything else you want to add about the 6 learner types before I move on to the Q&A? We have a few pre-collected questions from the audience, and we're going to open the floor to all the audience today as well. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think we've covered the 6 types. I think it's important for parents to understand as well that they're not intended to be hard and fast types. So I don't want you to leave and try to put your child exactly in a box. You know, a lot of kids will fit exactly in a box, but some need a little wiggle room.
Thank you. Yeah, so I will stop sharing here. We have a few, let me switch to the Chinese channel. 在直播线上的朋友和我们在 Zoom 线上平台的朋友，如果你们有什么问题的话，那你现在就可以打在那个聊天窗口里面，然后我们会一一的作答。 然后我现在会把前面我们以前收集到的一些问题先问一下那个 Vanessa 老师。好的。So I'll switch to the first. I ask the audience to type in if they have new questions, and then we pre-collected a few questions. I think because we have all the parents here, and then everyone is eager to know like what's the potential of their children, and want to understand what are the core capabilities or skill sets a child will need for them to become a future leader. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, and this is a fantastic question because this is one of the things that's changed the most in the world, I would say. You know, in the previous world, when a success, if you define success to be you know, an amazing career where you financially are secure and happy, you know, where did you work? You wanted to work at a bank, a consulting firm, you wanted to become a doctor. It required acquiring knowledge and holding that knowledge in a specific field. And, you know, that's certainly true today. But I think what's very different is the speed of change in the world. So even if you're a doctor, what you learn in medical school will very quickly, a lot of it in terms of the methodology, become obsolete because of technology. So there's surgeons now performing surgery entirely using, you know, lasers or other tools, not their hands. And if you're a lawyer, you might have AI that's working on contracts, or blockchain that is changing the way contracts are made. And so the world is changing so fast that the skills that you need to navigate the world are very different. One actually relates to a topic we just talked before, creativity. The ability to solve problems in novel ways is going to be something that differentiates kids from the pack in their careers. So creativity is very, very important. I would say resilience. Resilience is important because I think that the world is placing a lot more stress on kids these days. Imagine, you know, a world where, you know, that my dad lived in, where he started work as an engineer in his field and he stayed at the same company his whole career. You know, they're saying no child in school today will have that reality. They will change jobs, they will be entrepreneurs, they might not even have ever a job. And so the resilience to handle the ebbs and flows of a different life pattern is very, very, very important. And I think the third big one is really problem solving. And again, in a world where you have to reason from first principles because things are changing so fast, the ability to very objectively scan the landscape, understand the problem, solve the problem, it's so critical because there isn't going to be a playbook for a lot of problems that our students are going to solve. In fact, we don't even know what problems are going to solve. Could you imagine, like, if you think of your life today, could you imagine your elementary school teacher knowing that we had phones with more computing power than, you know, the most powerful computer in the world, that we would just walk around with them and communicate and take photos and live stream video? I'm old enough that I can still remember getting my first email, and I had to line up outside the university library and check out this thing called email. What's this thing? And now we have email at our fingertips. And so creativity, resilience, problem solving, those three skills are going to equip kids for the workplace of the future, because it will help them thrive in the unknown. It's not really about, can you understand information and memorize information. The days of that kind of skill acquisition are gone. A computer can already do that better than all of us. It's going to be about, how do you make sense of this crazy world? How do you make sense of it? And how do you succeed in an environment of change?
Wow, it still sounds, well, I have to say, like, it sounds very challenging. If I were a kid now, I wouldn't even know if I will be able to handle that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it's absolutely true.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think because of our audience today, we have over 100 people watching on live streaming, and so I think because the
Great.
majority of our audience today are Asian kids, and we know that the Asian countries has a totally different education system from the North American one, including U.S. and Canada. And so, from your observation and experience, so it might be a combined question, like the difference between the educational systems between Asia and North America. And from your observation of the children immigrate from Asian countries to Canada, like do they have sort of behavior patterns, or is there anything advantages or areas they could improve?
Yeah, so
That's
great
two
question.
questions. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, and I live in Toronto where there's many Asian students. And so, well, the first thing is the difference in the education systems. And I think they're becoming less different over time. I think they're starting to converge. But I think one of the biggest differences, and this probably had to do with population patterns, is Asian schools are very steeped in the tradition of standardized tests, lots of assessments, and really ranking kids based on tests. Really, because I think, Caroline, you can say that there are more kids in schools. And so
Yeah.
that was really the only tool available for a long time. Versus North American schools have been experimenting with different learning models, as have European schools through things like Montessori method. And so the assessment in North American schools is likely still a little broader. And so there's certainly still testing, but there's presentations, case studies, and qualitative assessments as well as quantitative assessments. So in many North American report cards now, kids actually have a resilience score. I talked about resilience being a key for the future. And so in the schools themselves, they will make qualitative assessments on, is this child displaying qualities of resilience, and actually make that as part of their annual report card. So that's one difference. But the more we talk to educators in China, the more that gap's being narrowed, because Chinese schools are evolving and changing as well. Now, the second part of your question, Asian students coming to Canada, I would actually say the first thing to point out is I do think there are still a lot of stereotypes, sadly, that Chinese children excel in quantitative subjects like math and science and not in other subjects. And I think that's a stereotype that still exists. However, in my experience, I don't think it's a true stereotype. Why do I say that? Because the Asian students I know, they love art and drawing and classical music and piano and many artistic fields. They just might not be the same artistic pursuits that exist in North America. And so I think that we still have a lot of work to do as North Americans in understanding the Chinese culture and how rich it is, and how that's a completely incorrect stereotype. Now, why does that stereotype exist? I think one reason, and I work with MBA students as well, one of the reasons it may exist is because one difference in North American culture is I think our culture is a little bit flatter in terms of how we show respect to our teachers and our bosses. And I think, the MBA students that I work with at Rotman tell me, you would never get up and disagree with your boss in a meeting in Asia. Like that would just not be an acceptable thing to do. And here in Canada, that's actually viewed as an asset. And so there's a very different communication style, probably a little more casual, but I think that can be misinterpreted. I think the Asian students' manners and politeness can sometimes be misinterpreted. And so, having Asian children slowly integrate into that communication style is probably one big difference.
Thank you. Maybe
Maybe
why
our kids should be more like that. Maybe our kids need a little more manners, to be totally honest.
I worked in both countries, so yes, I think some part, well, I would say majority part of the you are saying is true, and but I see some culture change in Chinese companies as well. So like the international companies and you, and also the tech companies like Alibaba and then those type of high tech companies. So the culture is generally changing a bit, especially with younger generation. But yeah, in general, in high level, yes, that is still the stereotype, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, I think thanks for Mongjia for running our live streaming platform. Mongjia, do you want to show online to let us know if there are any questions from the live streaming platform? Mongjia, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yeah. So any
thank you,
question from the platform? Yes,
you,
please go
Vanessa.
ahead.
No, thank you for having me.
Really amazing, fascinating. And I'm also feel more confidence, like how to make use to find their potential. I really like what you said. Everyone has his potential, especially for kids, right? And I also believe in that. And I collected some questions from the online stream, and also personally, I have some questions. Like you just mentioned about public speaking is quite important to help the youth to find out their potential, right? And also you just mentioned about communication styles is quite different for Asian people. Actually, it is really true. You know that in China, like Chinese people are not very good at expressing their ideas and expressing their emotions or anything in the meeting or on the stage. That is, I think that is quite a problem, especially for the youth to be a future leader. And that is also why I organized several events for the youth and to help them to provide such kind of stage. So I want to ask you a question. What do you think this kind of training, like public speaking, that have the impact on the youth, on the development of the youth? For example, when they get on the stage, such as a TEDx stage or something else, and you have a lot of students on that. So have you seen any changes before and after they get a training and became a speaker on the stage, on the public speaking stage?
Oh my gosh, yes. One of the most rewarding parts of Brain Power is watching students in public speaking transform, completely transform. And I would say a couple of reasons. The first is we treat public speaking like a science at Brain Power. So often there's courses that are an hour or 2 hours that claim to be able to teach your child to public speak. What we're asking a child to do is very, very hard. They are not comfortable and they don't have the tools yet to make these kind of speeches. So I have students that join us for public speaking for 2 hours a week for 34 weeks for multiple years. And so over those years, they study public speaking as if it was a science. So we learn about things like, why are you nervous on stage? Like there's a biological reason you're nervous. Your heart starts beating, your palms might be sweaty. And they start to recognize these things and understand them and how to overcome them. And then we give them the tools. So understanding, there's 3 aspects to a great public speaking, using the ancient words, ethos, pathos, logos. And we teach them all about the principles of what does make a public speaker effective, the ability to gain empathy, the ability to be logical, and the ability to connect with your audience. And by giving them tools and actual knowledge and very precedents of good speeches and getting them to practice and rehearse, just like that tennis metaphor I keep using, public speaking is no different. They need intensive training. Yeah.
Actually, I also interview some of the parents whose children just get on my TEDx stage, and they told me that the experience of as a speaker on the TEDx stage really influenced the children a lot. For example, there is a kid, he used to be a 6th grade year old child, and she get on my stage and to say something about gender equality on the stage. And then the parent told me that the girl just changed a lot after that experience. It became more like to show her ideas and like to make her voices to be heard. And also she attended some other international competitions and got the great award, and which made her feel more confident about to showing herself. And she is now much more confident than before. And it's really most of because of the public speaking and the experience on the stage. So I really think that public speaking is a good way, just like you mentioned, it's a good way for children to find their potential and to get the inner power and inner driver to do something. And the second question that I ask is from our audience is like, the past 3 years of
Monja, just hold on 1 second. I think Vanessa 刚刚好像掉线了，稍等。
掉线了是吧？
但是我觉得你刚刚那个问题，就是刚才我们其实可以把刚才那个就是前面讲的东西可以他回来了。
对。
Yeah, Vanessa is coming back. Yeah, you're back. Excellent.
Oh, sorry about that. Internet problems. Yeah.
It happens all the time. So Monja is just coming to the second question.
Yeah. During the past this is from audience, and during the past 3 years, we're in the pandemic period, so a lot of especially a lot of children now in China, they have to have the courses online, and they don't have so many chances to contact with the outside world. And maybe it is the same case in North America, right? So do you think this pandemic, what kind of impact on the children, especially the youth, during the pandemic period, and how to solve
really
the problem? Yeah, I think that there's a lot of problems. Yeah, we can see from the pandemic.
This is really sad because the standardized test scores, although I just said they're not the only thing, standardized test scores in Canada and in the US are starting to come out. And I know in Canada, for example, grade 3 and grade 6 test scores are the lowest they've ever been in history. In the US, this year's graduates, so this past June, had the lowest competency scores in history. And so I think there's many impacts, but I think the first one is quite literally learning was impacted. It was disrupted. If you remember, it took a while for schools to adjust. So in some cases, some schools lost 5-6 months of learning. Some students were not well supported online. They might not have had the technology or the tools to keep up with virtual learning. And some teachers in some school districts simply were not equipped to deliver education online. So I think we've rushed to figure all those things out. But in the meantime, the kids lost a lot of learning, like they're still catching up. I think the second impact, which I'm more worried about, because all the research suggests that eventually the kids will catch up on the actual missed learning, is the social impact.
Yeah.
So if you have a child, the biggest increase in enrollments we're seeing at Brainpower is sort of the grade 5-6 level, because those are kids that would have come out of kindergarten and never been in a classroom before. Mm-hmm. And now they're in grade 3 or 4. And so there are buckets of kids, same with kids in grade 9. Kids in grade 9 who were in grade 9 at the beginning of the pandemic, they have 1 year of high school only before university. Yeah. And imagine they're home and they've missed all that socialization. So I think that there are cohorts in those accelerated parts of development that really need to be back in person and communicating, or in very engaging online environments. Because I think we have to remember this type of group activity we're having where we're interacting, that wasn't how a lot of online learning happened. In many, many schools, it was very much the material was emailed, maybe you watched a lecture, but there's very little interaction and engagement. So the social development was also very much impacted, which is concerning.
Yeah, I actually want to echo that point because because I still remember my lifetime friends are from those ages. Yeah. So what if I don't only know them from internet, that will be a disaster. Yeah. I think
Yeah,
now
no,
Mengja is
absolutely.
present.
I even yeah, I think I even talk about it with individuals starting out their career, because I remember I posted to LinkedIn a little while ago, and I got a post that had so many likes because I was reflecting on my first year. I studied to be an accountant, and those first years where you're in the intense hours of working together, you forge these friendships that form your future network. And if I look at my career, so many doors that have been opened and so many of my very most valued friendships came from that time. And so these young professionals that were just working alone, I feel like they really lost a huge opportunity that just makes me so sad to think about it.
Totally agree. I think Mengja, we may have time for one last question.
But we have to catch them up, right?
Yeah. And Unispeak will have cooperate with Brain Power. Will have a courses on TED Talk, master classes, right? So my question is, do you have any expectations for the students who will join these courses?
No, I would say the only expectation is that they bring their whole selves and they put some love and effort into it. That's really the only expectation. Our job is to give them the skills and tools to be a TED-worthy public speaker. But public speaking is a skill just like math class. So we want kids to show up and to be engaged and ready to learn.
Yeah.
那我在这就是再用中文就是说一下，就是我们要和这个 Brain Power 第一次在国内的这样的一个 TED 演讲的大师课，然后我们要合作做这样的一个课程。如果有兴趣的小伙伴也可以来找我们。然后这个课程呢，我们应该在下周会开始。那有任何问题也可以来问我们。那我们也希望让更多的小朋友有机会去走上这个舞台去表达。真的，这是一个非常好的一个机会，尤其是在疫情的当下，我们更需要提供更多的舞台给我们的孩子们去表达，去接触社会的机会。谢谢。
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, for your answers.
I think before we finish,
thank you, and I hope you have a beautiful Saturday.
Yes, so before we finish, I'm sharing the QR code of WeChat group again. So we will share our PowerPoint and our video recorded via this WeChat group. So make sure you join the WeChat group, and then you can follow our WeChat account. And we will, if you need any of our personal contact to ask questions, we will share in the group chat as well. Having said that, Vanessa, can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, yes. Excellent. So thank you. So I would like to thank everyone. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Mengja, and thank you, Bob from Beihang University, and thank you, the AI 121。感谢大家的今天的参与，然后非常开心，我们今天有超过100人来参加我们这个现场直播。接下来我们也会在微信群里面分享更多的信息，非常感谢大家。好的，那今天咱们的直播活动。Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay, because of the time difference between Canada and Shanghai, I missed the first part of your great discussion. So is that possible to pass us a video to share the video?
Yes, so today's whole session is recorded. We will share the shareable link later on in the WeChat group, so to share with everyone. Yes, that will be available.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
No problem. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
好，感谢大家。Thank you. Okay, Vanessa, I lost your video. But that's okay. I think
You lost Ben's
Okay.
video?
There is another question from our online streaming audience.
Yeah, we can actually, Mongjia, you know what? Let's post the questions in the chat so we can we can answer them separately. What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's okay. I share it in the chat box. Someone asked, as an in-depth educator, can you share if there anything that you care but don't have answered yet? It's the general question.
There's a lot. Yeah. Okay. Maybe let's wrap up today. It's 9:20 now, and then so we can keep our communication open, and then maybe we'll have a next session in the coming weeks. Okay.
Excellent. I would love that.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.